I didn't plan on meeting the HOA president that morning, but there she was, heels clicking on gravel like she owned the ground beneath my boots, standing at the far end of my private bridge with 2 uniformed deputies behind her and a tow truck. "Sir," she called out, not even bothering to ask my name, "this structure is in violation of HOA access regulations. We'll be taking control of it effective immediately." I looked past her, beyond the deputies, beyond the truck, to the narrow wooden bridge stretching across the river, the only bridge, the one every single homeowner in her gated community used to enter and exit, the one sitting squarely on my land. I took a slow breath, folded my arms, and said the one thing that changed everything. "You might want to double-check who owns it before you try that." She smiled, that kind of smile people use when they think they've already won. That was her first mistake. Her name was Claire Holloway, president of the Silver Creek Estates HOA. And from the moment she opened her mouth, I could tell she wasn't used to hearing the word no. "This bridge connects to a residential development under HOA jurisdiction," she said, holding up a folder like it was a badge, "which means it falls under our compliance authority." One of the deputies shifted uncomfortably. The other kept glancing at me. They knew something she didn't. Or at least, they suspected it. I didn't move, didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my jacket, pulled out a folded document, and held it out. "County deed records," I said calmly. "Parcel 18 through 42, including the river crossing, including the bridge." She didn't take it, didn't even look. Instead, she stepped forward, lowering her voice like she was talking to a child. "I don't think you understand how this works." I almost laughed, because I understood exactly how this was going to work. 6 months earlier, I bought 2,400 acres of land just outside the county line, old farmland. Abandoned for years. No utilities, no structures, just open land, trees, and a river cutting straight through the middle like a scar. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet. And most importantly, it was mine. What I didn't know, what no one bothered to mention, was that the only road leading into Silver Creek Estates crossed that land, specifically over that bridge. The bridge had been there for decades, originally built by the farmer who owned the land before me. Back then, the HOA didn't exist, neither did the subdivision, but over time, developers built around the river, fenced everything off, and left one inconvenient detail untouched. They never secured legal ownership of the crossing. They just used it. For years, maybe decades. No one questioned it. Until I showed up. The first letter arrived 2 weeks after I moved in. Cream-colored envelope, embossed seal. Notice of non-compliance. I remember reading it twice, just to make sure I wasn't missing something. Apparently I was being fined for unauthorized structural modifications to the bridge. I hadn't touched it, but that didn't matter. According to the HOA, the bridge fell under their jurisdiction, and therefore, I needed approval to maintain it. Approval for something on my own land. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the county office, pulled every document tied to the property, survey maps, deeds, historical records. That's when I saw it, clear as day. The boundary line didn't stop at the river, it crossed it, and the bridge sat entirely within my property. Legally, undeniably, which meant one thing. They didn't own access. I did. The second letter wasn't a notice. It was a demand. $5,000 in fines, threat of legal action, and a deadline. That's when I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a power move. They thought I'd fold, pay up, stay quiet, like everyone else probably had. So I did something different. I sent them a certified letter, included copies of the deed, survey maps, a polite explanation, and one simple request: cease all claims over property you do not own. 3 days later, Claire Holloway showed up in person, unannounced, uninvited, and completely convinced she was in charge. "You've been ignoring official HOA communication," she said, stepping onto my porch like she owned it. I replied. She waved it off. "That doesn't count." I tilted my head slightly. "What part of documented ownership doesn't count?" Her expression tightened, because for the first time, she realized this might not be easy. The fines doubled. then tripled. They started sending contractors to inspect the bridge, without permission, without notice. I documented everything. Photos, videos, dates, names. I didn't confront them, didn't argue, just collected evidence, because I knew where this was going, and I wanted to be ready when it got there. Then one morning, I woke up to barricades. They had blocked the entrance to the bridge, orange cones, warning tape, a sign that read, HOA property, no unauthorized access. I stood there for a long moment. Then I smiled. Because they had just made a very expensive mistake, I made 3 calls that day. A lawyer, a surveyor, and the county planning office. Within 48 hours, I had everything I needed. Certified land surveys, official boundary confirmations, historical usage records, and one particularly interesting document, an easement request, filed years ago by the developers, denied. They never secured legal access. They just assumed it. And assumptions don't hold up in court. The day Claire returned with deputies and a tow truck was the day everything came to a head. "This is your final notice," she said, voice sharp with authority she didn't actually have. "We're reclaiming control of this bridge." One of the deputies finally spoke. "Ma'am, do you have documentation showing HOA ownership?" She hesitated, just for a second, then handed him a folder. He flipped through it, frowned, then looked at me. "Sir, do you have anything proving otherwise?" I handed him my file. Thicker, organized, precise. He read for a while, then handed it to his partner. They exchanged a look, the kind that says everything without a word. Finally, the first deputy turned back to Claire. "Ma'am, this appears to be private property." Her face went pale. "That's not possible." "It is," he said calmly, "and blocking access could be considered unlawful interference." The tow truck driver quietly stepped back. Smart man. Claire's confidence didn't fade all at once. It cracked, piece by piece. "This bridge serves our community," she insisted. "We have a right—" "No," I said quietly. "You had access." I stepped forward, just enough to make the point clear. "But you never had ownership." The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable, final. That's when my lawyer arrived, right on time. He didn't say much, just handed Claire a document, a formal notice, cease and desist, and a lawsuit. For trespassing, harassment, and unauthorized use of private property. Her hand shook as she read it, because now she understood. This wasn't a warning, this was consequences. Within a week, everything changed. The barricades were gone, the fines were withdrawn, and the HOA suddenly wanted to negotiate. They requested an easement, offered payment, maintenance agreements, even an apology. I listened, considered, then made my decision. I agreed to a conditional easement, limited access, strict terms, annual fees, and one non-negotiable clause. Any future violation voids the agreement immediately. They signed, because they didn't have a choice. Claire Holloway didn't last long after that. The homeowners weren't happy. Turns out cutting off the only access point to their neighborhood tends to upset people. She was voted out within a month, replaced by someone who understood something she never did. Power doesn't come from authority. It comes from knowing where the boundaries actually are. Now, every time I cross that bridge, I take my time, because it reminds me of something simple. They thought they controlled access. They thought they made the rules. But in the end, they were just visitors on land they never owned.